I stood behind the velvet curtain, its weight matching the gravity of the moment. My graduation cap was pinned carefully over my curls, and I clutched my diploma folder with trembling hands. 4 years of sleepless nights, juggling part-time jobs, and skipping meals had led to this singular moment. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. In truth, the first to even move beyond community college. Pride and anxiety battled in my chest. Then I heard it. A loud voice rang from the audience. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video. Then my father's voice, slurred and rough, rose above the murmur of the crowd. Don't look so proud, girl. We paid for that piece of paper. You just partied your way through. My mother laughed openly, making no effort to lower her voice. She looks ridiculous in that gown, like a penguin trying to act important. I stood frozen behind the curtain. I should have anticipated this. I had invited them, motivated by guilt and some lingering, fragile hope, that they might come and recognize the effort, the achievement. But they were unchanged. Not even today could inspire decency. When my name was called and the spotlight hit me, I stepped forward with my head held high. I felt their eyes pierce through the cheers of my classmates and the proud smiles of my professors. Then, just as I reached for the dean's hand, my father rose from his seat and bellowed, "No daughter of mine deserves applause for wasting my money." The auditorium fell silent. To the shock of all, he mounted the steps, brazen, loud, and in front of the entire crowd, he struck me across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the microphone. I staggered, nearly dropping my diploma folder. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A voice called out, "Security!" And still, my mother laughed. She needed that. Maybe now she'll remember who gave her everything. I stood in disbelief, humiliated. What should have been the proudest day of my life had turned into a public assault by my own father. But what remains etched in my memory, more than the sting of his hand, was what I did next. I didn't weep. I didn't retaliate. I calmly bent down, retrieved my fallen cap, turned to the microphone, and said, "You didn't give me everything. You gave me trauma. And now you've given me freedom." Then I walked off the stage. Security removed them as the auditorium buzzed. A sea of whispers, of cell phones lifted in disbelief. But I never once looked back. After the ceremony, professors gathered around me. Some students embraced me. One dean said quietly, "You carried yourself with more dignity than I've seen in years." The truth, I was shattered inside. I ignored every call over the next week. They left dozens of voicemails and messages, ranging from anger to manipulation. "You humiliated us. You owe us an apology. We sacrificed everything for you. Your sister would have been grateful." Ah yes, my sister, the family's golden child. She dropped out of college after one semester, used their money for cosmetic surgery, and never held a real job in her life. They treated her like royalty. And me. I was the mistake, the disappointment, the ungrateful one. But I was no longer broken. Not anymore. Because what they didn't realize was that I had been preparing. Quietly. Intentionally. Strategically. And what I was about to do would dismantle everything they thought they controlled. After the public humiliation at graduation, I vanished. I blocked their numbers, deactivated all social media, and left the city without a word. I needed time, not just to heal, but to plan. They had turned my milestone into a nightmare, but I was determined it would not be the final scene in my story. I moved in with my former college roommate, Hannah, whose family had, without obligation, treated me with more love and warmth. than my own ever had. I took on 3 jobs: freelance editing by night, waitressing through weekends, and handling administrative work at a tech startup by day. And I never once complained, because every shift, every paycheck, brought me closer to the moment I'd take control. You see, when I was 16, my grandfather, my father's father, quietly named me the secondary beneficiary of a long-term investment account. I had cared for him when he was sick, prepared his meals, managed his medications, kept him company. My parents hardly visited. He passed away 2 years into my college journey, and with the help of an attorney, I rolled those funds into a trust, quietly, legally, and independently. No one knew, because I never touched a cent. Until now. With those trust funds, and the money I had scraped together from months of relentless work, I made a move they never anticipated. I bought their house. They didn't even know it was slipping into foreclosure. My father had stopped paying property taxes, too consumed by gambling. My mother, as usual, had been spending carelessly on spa weekends and covering my sister's lifestyle. When the house was listed for auction, I submitted the highest bid, discreetly, through a proxy. And just like that, the home they had always weaponized against me, the one they said I'd never be worthy of, belonged to me. A week later, I had the locks changed. They returned from another luxury weekend, one they hadn't paid for themselves, and found themselves locked out. I watched from across the street, parked and silent. My mother screamed into her phone. My father pounded the door with increasing rage. Then I stepped out. "You might want to stop that," I said evenly. "It's considered trespassing now." They turned. My mother's face twisted in disbelief. My father's hands clenched into fists. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "I own this house," I replied, holding up the deed. "And starting today, you don't." "You ungrateful brat," my mother hissed. "After everything we gave you?" "Everything you gave me," I nearly laughed. "You gave me trauma, silence, public shame, not support, not safety. You mocked me, humiliated me, hit me in front of strangers, and still expected me to bow in gratitude." I said. "You can't do this," my father shouted. "We raised you." "No," I said. My voice didn't waver. "You raised your hands at me. Now I've raised my income, my credit score, and your mortgage. So get off my property." They stood there in stunned silence, as everything they believed untouchable slipped from their hands. My mother burst into tears. My father's face turned a furious shade of purple. And just when I believed they might finally walk away, they revealed one last desperate card. "Well then," my mother hissed, "I hope you enjoy paying our pensions, since they're tied to the house." I smiled. Actually, about those pensions. When I acquired the property, I uncovered a critical detail. The retirement accounts had been partially funded through the equity of the house. Once I legally purchased the home, I filed a motion to freeze that equity account and reallocated the funds into a family trust under my control. There was a clause, buried in the original documents authored by my grandfather, that granted the secondary beneficiary, me, the right to assume full control. In cases of family dispute or abuse, all I needed was documented evidence. And I had it. 3 high-definition video recordings of the incident at my graduation ceremony, submitted to the court. Admissible. Unambiguous. As a result, all pension withdrawals were frozen pending the court's approval of a new trustee. And since I held power of attorney over my grandfather's trust, I leaned forward slightly and whispered, "You might want to start applying for jobs. Maybe as janitors at my old high school. I hear they're hiring." They stood motionless, rooted in the grass, their complexions drained of color. For the first time in my life, they were powerless, speechless. I turned, walked to the front door, and said, "Have a nice life. And tell my sister she just lost her rent sponsor, too." Then I closed the door. Behind me, silence. Before me, peace. I wish I could say they left with heads bowed in shame. But people like my parents rarely know humility. In the weeks that followed, the harassment began. Angry voicemails, venomous texts, messages from distant relatives, accusing me of cruelty and ingratitude. They didn't know the full story. They rarely do. But I had stepped beyond the reach of their opinions. I was done justifying my survival. What came next was not vengeance. It was restoration. I began renovations, not to move in, but to convert the space into something far greater than the home I once feared. My childhood bedroom became a compact but functional office. The living room evolved into a counseling center, and the basement, once my hiding place, was transformed into a warm, inviting space, filled with books, legal resources, soft seating, and a tea station. I called it the second start home. It was a haven for young adults, those who had aged out of the foster care system, or who, like me, had been discarded by toxic families. The moment they became inconvenient, here they found safety. Financial literacy classes, resume building support, professional therapy, the very things I once wished someone had offered me. When a local paper published a story about the center, with my identity kept anonymous, the community responded with overwhelming generosity. Donations flowed in. Attorneys offered pro bono services. Licensed therapists reached out. Even a former professor of mine volunteered to lead workshops. And my parents, they tried to retaliate. They hired an attorney in a futile attempt to regain access to the pension account. It did not end well. In court, my lawyer presented the video. The footage of my father striking me across the face on stage, my mother clapping in the front row. The judge didn't even allow the case to proceed to closing statements. The decision was immediate. The pension fund was permanently transferred to me as trustee, with one condition, that I manage it in a way consistent with the moral values of the original grantor. That grantor was my grandfather, and I remembered his words clearly. "You don't build legacies on screams." So, I honored him. I used the funds to purchase another building. I transformed it into a shelter, a safe haven offering free housing and resources to survivors of domestic abuse. One evening, after a support group session had ended, I stepped outside and saw them, my parents, standing quietly at the edge of the street. They looked different now. Not cruel, just diminished, tired, fragile, even embarrassed. "We're homeless," my mother murmured. My father couldn't meet my eyes. There was a long pause, thick with unspoken history. She glanced at the center's warmly lit windows. "You built all this?" she asked in a hushed voice. "Yes," I replied evenly. "With our money," my father muttered. I gave him a small smile. "No, with what little humanity you had left. Because that's all you ever gave me to work with." Silence followed, heavier than before. Then came the question I always knew would surface. "Can we stay?" my mother asked. "Just for a night?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A younger version of myself wanted to say yes, longing for acceptance, for some version of love. But the woman I had become, she had already made peace with never being their daughter again. I looked at them gently, but firmly. You're not on the list, I said. This place is for people who've suffered. And I turned away. That night, I sat alone in my office, watching the security footage. My parents walking into the cold, carrying nothing. It should have hurt. But it didn't, because I had taken the ugliest day of my life, my graduation, and used it to build something meaningful. Not out of shame, not out of revenge, but from purpose. And the very next morning, I walked across another stage. This time, it wasn't to accept a diploma. It was to receive an award from the mayor's office, recognizing my work in transforming trauma into refuge. The audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation, and in the front row, I saw Hannah, my roommate, my chosen sister, wiping tears from her eyes. This time, I smiled without fear, because no one was there to slap it off my face. And that was the real graduation. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this story from?